Hello, welcome to CSC 8025, Computer and Network Security. My name is Brady Chen. I'm from Department of Computer Science at Fitchburg State University. So the course consists of many modules which cover the fundamentals of number theory, authentication and encryption and decryption technologies, as well as some of the well-known security-related topics. And it also covers some well-known encryption and decryption algorithms widely used in industries. Module 1, Information and Network Security Concepts. Now, in this module, we will first define many of the terminologies used in the information and the network security. We'll then provide the overview of the main areas of network security and the cryptographic algorithms. Okay, so we're going to divide Module 1 into two parts, Module 1A and Module 1B. So in Module 1A, we're going to cover two learning objectives. The first one, we're going to actually describe the key security requirements of confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Now, these three requirements are known as the CIA triad. Okay, so we're going to talk about this in 1A. We'll also discuss the types of security threats and attacks that must be dealt with, and we'll also give an example of the type of threats and attacks that apply to different categories of computer and network assets. Okay, so that's something we're going to cover in Module 1A. Okay, and in Module 1B, we're going to cover the rest of these learning objectives. So we will start our discussions by defining the cybersecurity. Okay, now cybersecurity is a very general term that includes the information security and network security. Now here's a definition of cybersecurity by ITU-T. So this is the International Telecommunication Union telecommunication standardization sector. So it's the organization under the United Nations. Now the document is the X.1205. That's the document name that provides definition. Now, in this definition, cybersecurity is defined as the collection of tools, policies, security concepts, security safeguards, guidelines, risk management approaches, action, training, best practice assurance, and technologies that can be used to protect the cyber environment and the organization and the user's assets. Now here, they particularly provide the definition for the organizations and the user assets, which includes the connected computing devices, personnel, infrastructure, applications, services, telecommunication systems, and the totality of transmitted and stored information in the cyber environment. So the cybersecurity strives to ensure the attainment and the maintenance of the security properties of the organization and the user's assets against relevant security risks in the cyber environment. So here are the general security objectives. One is the availability, and then the integrity, which may include the authentication and the non-repudiation, and the confidentiality. And these three are basically called the CIA triad. So we're going to talk about this in the follow-up slides. As we mentioned earlier, that cybersecurity is the general term that includes the information security and the network security. Now, the information security in particular refers to the preservation of confidentiality, integrity, and availability of information. Now we focus on information now. So now in addition, other properties such as authenticity, accountability, non-repudiation, and reliability can also be involved. Now, for the network security, it refers to the protection of networks and their services from unauthorized modification, destruction, and disclosure, and the provisions of assurance that the network performs its critical functions correctly, and there are no harmful side effects. Now, these are the definition for information security and the network security. Now, in the cybersecurity definition we discussed in the previous slides, we mentioned about the CIA triad, right? Okay, so these three requirements include the confidentiality, integrity, availability. Now, some in the security field, like additional concepts, are also needed to present a complete picture of this. So they added two more requirements. One is called authenticity, and the other one is called accountability. So we'll talk about all these three in the next couple of slides. So let's first talk about the CIA triad. Now the first one is confidentiality. Now this term covers two related concepts. Now, so first thing is the data confidentiality. It basically assures that the private or confidential information is not made available or disclosed to unauthorized individuals. That's the meaning of data confidentiality. Now, the other meaning of the confidentiality is the privacy. It assures that the individuals control or influence what the information related to them may be collected and stored, and by whom and to whom that information may be disclosed. So privacy basically means the individual has the complete controls of his or her data. Now the second term is the integrity. Now this term covers two related concepts. Okay, one is the data integrity, the other one is the system integrity. Now data integrity assures that the data and the programs are changed only in the specified and authorized manners. Okay, so you cannot change the data without authorization. Now the system integrity basically assures that the system performs its intended function in the unimpaired manners, free from the deliberate or inadvertent unauthorized manipulation of the system. Okay, so the system should perform whatever the system is supposed to perform. Okay. The last objective is the availability. Availability assures that the system works promptly and the service is not denied to authorized users. So whoever actually subscribed for these particular data or services should have the access to these service and data. That's the availability. So now here's the complete puzzle for the security objectives. So originally we have confidentiality, integrity, and availability, plus the accountability and authenticities. So that's the whole picture of the security objectives. Okay, so when dealing with information security, we're facing a lot of challenges. Now here are some of the list of these challenges. Now the first one, security is not simple. even though the security requirements seems to be very straightforward. For example, like the confidentiality, authentication, or integrity. Now these names seem to be self-explanatory and very easy to understand. However, the mechanisms used to meet those requirements could be quite complex. For example, one mechanism may contain a couple of steps, and these steps are not easy to understand. Okay, now because of this point, so the procedures used to provide a particular services are often counterintuitive. Okay, so typically a security mechanism is complex because it's not obvious from the statement of the particular requirement that such elaborate measures are needed, because people always feel like, wow, this mechanism used to deal with the security requirement seems to be an overkill. We spend too much money on this. Okay, so that's the challenge. Okay, and the fourth one, it's necessary to decide where to use the various, security mechanisms. Now this is true both in terms of physical placement and in a logical sense. Now for the physical placement, for example, at what points in the network are certain security mechanisms are needed? Okay, and then in the logical sense, we're going to think about at what layer or layers of the architecture a security mechanism is needed. Okay, that's the fourth. And then security mechanisms typically involves more than a particular algorithm or protocol. Okay, so for example, to deal with the authentication requirement, so typically they also requires a participant to be in possession of some secret information like a password or encryption key. Now this is going to raise some questions about the creation, distribution, and the protection of these secret information. Okay, so that's the reason why the security mechanism typically involves more than a particular algorithm or protocol. Okay, so here are some more information security challenges. Okay, now the security is essentially a battle of wits between a perpetrator and the designer. A perpetrator tries to find holes, and the designer and the administrator tries to close them. Now this is not an equal fight, because the great advantage that the attacker has is that he or she needs only find a single weakness, or while the designer must find and eliminate all the weaknesses to achieve the perfect security. So the attacker has a great advantage in this battle. As we always say, a system is only as strong as its weakest point. Okay, just like a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. So to protect a system, you need to think about to close all the holes. Okay, that's one of the biggest challenge. Now the other point is little benefit from the security investment is perceived until security failures occurs. Now most of the time people think these security mechanisms are kind of overhead. We spend a lot of money but we don't see any benefits. Now this is true until the system fails. They have a security failure. So that's the other challenge. Okay, and also security requires a constant monitoring. Okay, so that means you cannot set up a time and say we place the security mechanisms between 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. because the attackers, they're never going to actually, select the time. They're going to attack at any time. So that's the other challenge. Okay. And also the security is, is too often it's afterthought. Okay. Once the system is built, then people start to think about the security mechanisms. So in general, the strong security is often viewed as impediment to efficient and user-friendly operations. Many times people think the security is some kind of features that cause the performance issues, because make the system slower and make it less user-friendly interface. Okay, so that's the biggest challenge. Now, when we actually look at all these, the biggest challenge is that people always think the investment on security is kind of overhead. Do we really necessary to spend that much time in the security? And that's the biggest challenge, because until the security failures occur, people then realize, wow, we really should actually put more money on the security. Now, to assess effectively the security needs of an organization or a company, and to evaluate and choose various different security products and policy, people who are responsible for security need some systematic way of defining what are these requirements for security, and also characterizing the approaches to satisfying these requirements. Now, the OSI security architecture, which is from the ITUT recommendation X.800, that's a document, defines such a systematic approach. Now, OSI is basically stand for Open Systems Interconnection, and ITUT-T stands for the International Telecommunication Union Telecommunication Standardization Sector, which is an organization under the United Nations. They always provide recommendations for the industries and define some kind of a standard. Okay, X.800 is the recommendation for the OSI security architecture. Okay, now in the OSI security architecture, basically it focuses on three categories. The first one is the security attack. They define what is a security attack. And then the security mechanism, the mechanism to deal with the security attack. And then the kind of security services that's provided. Okay. Now, first let's talk about security attack. Security attack is defined as any action that compromises the security of information owned by an organization. That's security attack. Now, what is security mechanism? It is a process or a device incorporating such a process that is designed to detect, prevent, or recover from a security attack. That's called a security mechanism. Okay. So then OSI security architecture also defines the security services. So service is a processing or communication services that enhances the security of the data processing systems and the information transfers of the organization. Okay. Now the security services are intended to counter security attacks. So they make use of one or more security mechanisms to provide these services. Okay, so that's the OSI security architecture. Now, in the literature of this X.800, the two terms, one is the threat, and the other one is attack, are commonly used. Now, what is a threat? What is attack? And what's the difference between threat and attack? So, threat is a circumstance or event with the potential to adversely impact organizational operations, organizational assets, individuals and other organizations, or the nation through an information system via unauthorized access, destruction, disclosure, modification of information, and the denial of services. Okay. A threat is a possible danger that might exploit a vulnerability. So a threat is not something happened, it's a potential. Now, the other term is attack. Attack is any kind of malicious activity that attempts to collect, disrupt, deny, or degrade or destroy information system resources or information itself. That's defined as an attack. So now you can clearly see what's the difference between threat and attack. Threat is a potential. Attack is a kind of action which has already happened. So let's provide a detailed information on the concepts defined in the OSI architecture, the security architecture. Now, let's first talk about security attack. Okay, there are two types of attack. Passive attack and active attack. Now, a passive attack attempts to learn and make use of the information from the system, but does not affect the system resources. So that means the passive attack basically simply, secretly get into your system and view the documents, but does not change any information. Okay, like eavesdrop, something like this. Now, an active attack attempts to alter system resources or affect their operations. They aggressively change the data in your system or change the procedures and how the system is actually performs its job. So these are two different types. Now here are some of the examples of the passive attack. One of the examples is like a release of message contents, okay, but does not change the contents. And also, they monitor the traffic of your messages, okay. So do the traffic analysis. These two are examples of passive attacks. Now for the active attacks, one of the example is the replay. Okay, so they, get the information and also play as their own. Okay, masquerade, and also data modification, and the denial of service. Okay, now for denial of service, it's kind of attack that. So they cannot break the system, but they actually, provide a lot of actual traffickers to eventually block the users, legitimate users, to access the system. That's also an active attack. Okay. And the second concept is the security services. Okay. Now these are the type of security services we're going to perform. Authentication, access control, data confidentiality, data integrity, non-repudiation, and availability services. Okay, non-repudiation is kind of a service that will prevent people from denying their wrongdoing. Okay. We're going to talk about this in detail in the follow-up slides. So now the last one concept is the security mechanisms. Okay. Now security mechanism is the kind of algorithms, steps we actually implement to meet the requirements. Okay. So for example, cryptographic algorithm, that's the mechanism, like a encryption decryption algorithm, and data integrity, and digital signature, authentication exchange, traffic padding, routing control, notarization, and access control. These are the examples of the mechanisms, the security mechanisms. Okay, so let's talk about the security attacks in detail. Now, security attack is a useful means of classifying security attacks in terms of passive attacks and active attacks. Now, these are both used in X.800. Remember, it's the document created in the ITU-T. Okay, and also the other document called RFC 4949. IFC is actually a request for comments. It is a formal standard track document developed by a working group within something called the Internet Engineering Task Force. Internet Engineering Task Force, IETF. That's the document, developed in that group. Both the X.800 and RFC 4949 basically use these terms, passive attacks and active attacks. Okay. So a passive attack is more like an eavesdropping, right? It's an attempt to learn or make use of information from the system, but does not affect the system's resources. And an active attack is alter the system resources or affect their operation. We actually learned this in the previous slide. Okay. Okay, so let's talk about the passive attacks. The passive attacks are in the nature of eavesdropping on or monitoring of transmissions. So basically, the attack is basically sitting quietly and listen to other people's talking. Okay. So the goal of the opponent is to obtain information that is being transmitted. Now, as we mentioned earlier, that there are two types of passive attacks. One is the release of message contents, and the other one is the traffic analysis. They don't even see the message, but they, try to analyze the communication pattern. Okay, so we'll talk about this a little more in the follow-up slides. Now, what is the active attack? So basically, active attacks involve some modification of the data stream or the creation of the false stream. Now, the goal is to detect attacks and to recover from any disruption or delays caused by them. So there are four types of active attacks. Okay, masquerade, replay, data modification, and denial of service. We're going to talk about each of these types in detail. Okay, so let's talk about the four active attacks. The first one is masquerade. Okay, so masquerade takes place when one entity pretends to be a different entity. Okay, now for example, authentication sequences can be captured, by an opponent and replayed after valid authentication sequence has taken place, and thus enabling an authorized entity with few privileges to obtain extra privileges by impersonating an entity that has those privileges. Okay. Now, the masquerade usually includes one of the other forms of active attack. You're going to combine with the replays and also the other, like a data modification. So now, the second active attack is called replay. Replay involves the passive capture of a data unit and its subsequent retransmission to produce an unauthorized effect. So replay, for example, the opponent just captures the message, and then later replay the message, and pretend he's the legitimate user. Okay. Now the data modification, it's this is straightforward, right? When someone just attacked the system and then modify the data, that's definitely an active attack. The data modification basically means some portion of a legitimate message is altered, or messages are delayed or reordered to produce an unauthorized effect. So in any way, they just mess up the original message. Now the last type of active attack is called denial of service. Denial of service basically prevents or inhibits the normal use or management of the communications facility. So many cases, the denial of service may have a specific destination. For example, the purpose of the denial of service is to knock down a particular website, or the disruption of entire networks. Either by disabling the networks for using some means, or by overloading it with messages. So just send tons of messages to that, to flood the networks, as to degrade the performance of the networks. So eventually causing the closing of the networks. Okay, so here is the summary of security attacks. So at the top, this represents a normal flow of communications. A client just send a message to the server, and the server reply with another messages. It's a kind of normal flow. Now with passive attack, so the third party, the attacker, basically sitting there and grab all the messages that the client sent to the server and the server sent to the client. Okay, but the attack doesn't actually change any messages. Okay, now the active attack, one of the active attacks is that the attacker basically received the message from the client and modify the message, and then send to the server and pretending he is the original client. And then the server basically then tried to send a message back to the client, but instead it just sent back to the attacker. Attacker modified the message and sent to the client. So the attacker intercepted the messages and modified the messages and basically mess up the whole communications. Now this diagram basically shows the another active attack, including masquerade data modification or denial of service. For example, the attacker basically keeps sending the messages to the servers, basically flood the servers to actually eventually degrade the performance of the server networks. So the last one, like a replay, the attacker first grab the message, capture the message from the client, and then replay it. Pretend he is the legitimate user of the attack. Now, here I want to actually emphasize one thing. Some people think the active attack is more dangerous than the passive attack. They think because the passive attack does not change the messages, change the data, but the active attack basically damages the data. So the truth is, it's hard to say which kind of attack causes more damages. Sometimes the passive attacks causes much more damages than the active attack. because the reason for this is because active attack, once it's happened, people can easily detect and prevent it from happening again. But for passive attack, the attack may actually sitting there for many years, and they actually take advantage of the secret information and take advantage of all this information for their own good. So it's hard to say. They're basically, they're all actually dangerous, so we have to prevent both of this. It's hard to say which one is more cause more damage than the other. Okay, so that's the end of the module 1A. Thank you.